helping them sleep at night, keeping them safe, protected.
This is how the police want us to see them, the people we turn to for help. The Sarah Everard case, though, has threatened to shatter this image, that a police officer could misuse his power and betray the public's trust. Senior officers are now advising women what to do if they feel threatened by a policeman.
If somebody doesn't feel safe and they're not comfortable in the environment and they're dealing with a police officer, then ask them some questions. Where are you from? Why have you stopped me? Where are your colleagues? And that way they can start to feel safe. And if they really don't feel safe, they can dial 999.
The Met's website even suggested if, after all of that, you feel in real and imminent danger, then you must seek assistance, shouting out to a passerby, running into a house, knocking on a door, waving a bus down.
As someone who's lived in London my whole life, the idea that you could flag down a bus that's in between stops in any circumstances is ludicrous. I think any Londoner will know.
Campaigners say the idea that it's up to women to keep themselves safe by challenging police officers is equally absurd.
There really was nothing that Sarah Everard could do in that situation without, resisting what, as far as she knew, was a lawful arrest, which is an offence. It's an offence to resist arrest. This is why the change needs to come from within. It needs to come from within the police, because members of the public in a situation where someone is abusing and manipulating their power really have very limited scope to protect themselves.
23 years ago, Britain was rocked by another criminal betrayal of trust. The GP Harold Shipman was believed to have murdered 250 of his patients by injecting them with lethal doses of diamorphine. At that time, no one suggested that we should be suspicious of doctors and what they prescribe. It was understood by the medical profession that it was up to them to monitor their colleagues and build in safeguards. Is that the lesson too for the police? There is widespread concern that too many warning signs about Wayne Couzens were missed. An allegation of indecent exposure was made just 3 days before Sarah Everard's murder. It's also alleged that he and other officers from the Met and other forces shared discriminatory WhatsApp messages, including misogynistic content. Today, the Prime Minister said there needs to be a full investigation into this.
I think there's some very disturbing stuff in that, and we need to get to the bottom of it. We also need to get to the bottom of the WhatsApp groups where messages were being exchanged between police officers. I am concerned. And Tim, let me be very frank with you. I think that the police do a wonderful job. I think many types of crime are coming down. But there is one area where I think the issue of trust needs to be addressed square on. And it's in the way we handle crimes against women and girls.
But campaigners say that the boys' club culture of some police forces has been ignored for too long.
And no doubt there are cases that are investigated properly and robustly by the police, but I think there is a real problem of a kind of boys' club culture and a locker room culture, I'm afraid to say. But the fact is that if you don't have basic things like a principle that whenever a complaint is made against a police officer of one force, that complaint is investigated by an independent force or an independent body, you're not going to have robust investigations, or it's going to be far too easy for serious allegations to be swept under the carpet.
The UK is supposed to have policing by consent. It may not always work, but some level of trust that the police are there to protect citizens is essential. Winning it back is as urgent as it is difficult.
David Grossman there. I'm now joined by the former Chief Constable of Nottinghamshire Police, Sue Fish. During her time as Chief Constable, she introduced some pioneering training courses for police officers to help them understand what type of sexual misconduct happens in the force and to mark out the boundaries of professional behaviour for officers. So, Sue Fish, thanks for joining us. Can you give us a reaction to those? I mean, it's obviously a very difficult moment. The Met's trying to re-establish trust with Britain's women, and these guidelines, though, this idea that you should question a lone officer if you happen to be in that situation, or even try to wave down a bus. What do you make of that from your experience?
I think the piece that you had earlier summed it up for me. It's completely absurd. It's impractical, and to think that the Metropolitan Police had the best part of 6 months to work out what their response was going to be following the sentencing of Wayne Couzens. The fact that they've come up with this feels that they simply don't understand the issue and have absolutely no insight whatsoever.
So you're surprised that the Commissioner, for example, did not say very clearly to the sort of worried women of Britain simply that this will never happen again. We will not allow someone like Wayne Couzens to become a police officer, still remain a police officer. That's the sort of reassurance that was required.
Well, it's very hard to give absolutes, isn't it? But I think some of the key issues that she could have said, or her spokespeople could have made really clear, is, for example, making misogyny a hate crime and running a comprehensive training programme and communications plan that complements that. We did that in Nottinghamshire and it made a significant difference. But what drove that was clear, committed leadership, where you're prepared to listen and you're prepared to hear really uncomfortable things and then to take appropriate and thoughtful and, quite honestly, culture-changing action. This isn't about an individual officer. This is about a prevailing culture within policing, and it has to be broken. It has to have been broken many years ago, but the reality is we are where we are. But we have to, and policing has to, the government has to, and I think the public have to say this is not good enough and expect far more.
So you're clearly saying that there were systemic failures here in this case. I mean, do you detect in the response that you see from the Met, from the government, that they're trying to suggest it's a kind of one bad apple, very bad apple type of situation and brush it under the carpet?
Sadly, yes, I do. And what I'm seeing and hearing from both the Prime Minister and from the Commissioner is a complete lack of understanding of the nature of the culture in policing and therefore what needs to be done to address it.
I mean, we should say the Commissioner, Cressida Dick, did say any lessons are going to be learned and that they will be publishing a strategy into violence against women.
How many times have we heard lessons will be learned, and how often really are they? I think there are some things that need to be done far more publicly, and one of those is a public inquiry along the lines of the Macpherson inquiry into the murder of Stephen Lawrence. That was a seismic change for policing in relation to racism. We need that around misogyny.
Now, you experienced this firsthand. You've told of sexual assaults by superior officers that you didn't feel able to report at the time. You pioneered this misogyny as a hate crime and trying to retrain your police force. What is it going to take to change the culture that you are criticising so severely here?
I think we have all the evidence now. It's about making those sorts of changes. It's fundamental root and branch changes to recruitment, to vetting, to selection processes, around training and around misconduct hearings. For example, discipline inquiries and misconduct. It's around consistency and about making it really clear that officers who commit these sorts of offences, and by that I mean the range from extremely serious criminal offences to what I suppose are called lower level crimes, but are still devastating for those upon whom it impacts, whether that's colleagues, whether that's their partners, whether that's vulnerable victims of crime. And police officers are, sadly, and in many ways surprisingly, if you don't understand the culture, exploiting those women, abusing their power on a sadly all too regular basis.
So is it possible for this change to be made with Commissioner Cressida Dick in place at the Met?
I hope so.
Well, thank you very much for joining us there, Sue Fish.